one time I asked my dad, well, why did you give me the name Suguru? And he said, because it means straight. It means you're going to be, you will be a straight person, like a katana.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key. Thanks for tuning in. We always appreciate you listening to the show. So, Scott, my experience growing up in the San Gabriel Valley is, I would consider mostly like an American experience, all-American kid, but definitely I have some Asian background or Asian roots. And that's definitely been a topic on our show, right? Like different people's experience growing up here in the San Gabriel Valley.
Yeah, we've talked about the different ethnic groups that we see here in the valley and how diverse they all are. Mm-hmm. And even in your own case, you have talked about your experiences growing up and how your ethnic background has affected you or influenced you.
Right. I mean, even though I consider myself American or Japanese American, I did do a lot of cultural things with regard to my Japanese background. I would go to Nisei Week Parade and Obon festivals and play in the Japanese basketball leagues. And those, I think, now that I'm older, I look back and I say, wow, that's really a part of the Japanese American community here in Southern California, definitely in the San Gabriel Valley.
And that's been a very strong part of our community, the Japanese American community. But it's more diverse than many people may think.
Sure.
And I think it's very interesting to talk to somebody who can give us some insight and some light into, these differences that you would experience in that community.
Sure. Yeah, and that brings us to our guest today. Our guest is Bryan Takeda. He's president of Affinity Associates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, and more than that, though, he's a lifelong resident of the San Gabriel Valley and very dedicated to the Japanese American experience here. So welcome, Bryan, to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for
inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Yeah, so you are obviously Japanese American, and what is your connection, or what is your experience here in the San Gabriel Valley?
Well, I lived my entire life here in Pasadena. I attended elementary school up in Altadena, Franklin Elementary, Washington Junior High School, John Muir High School, and then attended UCLA. But and I've never moved away.
Would you consider your experience growing up in Pasadena like many other residents in Pasadena or many other Japanese?
There are quite a few of us. All of my childhood friends, a lot of them still live in the area.
Oh, yeah. You mean there were a lot of also Japanese in Pasadena?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
When I first moved to the San Gabriel Valley in 1984, and I moved to Monterey Park, it had a very strong Japanese community.
Right.
And I don't know is there a heart or center of the Japanese community, or was the population pretty much dispersed throughout the valley?
I think most Japanese Americans would consider Little Tokyo the center of the Japanese American community. And if you think about it, if you look at a map, downtown Los Angeles is like right in the center of Greater Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. But, after World War II, after the Japanese incarceration experience, when Japanese Americans were allowed to resettle into communities, you'll see that we resettled into specific areas of cities. Okay, so, and that's because those are the only places where they would allow Japanese to live.
Would an example of that be like in Monterey Park, where I grew up? Like I remember a lot of Japanese around the Brightwood area.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So in Pasadena, there was a large concentration of Japanese Americans in Northwest Pasadena. So that's where most of us grew up.
I was mentioning to Scott earlier that there's a temple there.
Yes, my temple, the Pasadena Buddhist Temple.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I grew up there. It's increasingly diverse today, but when we were children, we were all Japanese Americans who grew up there. We went to Sunday school. We had a lot of activities, and we celebrated the Obon Festival every summer. And then as time went on, as I became a teenager, sports became an increasing, it was an important part of our life, right? Mm-hmm. And so actually, Mr. Sakai, this guy was visionary. He was a member of the Buddhist temple, and he was the one who really pushed to build a gymnasium at the temple. And at the time, I don't think many of the Japanese Americans understood the importance of having a gymnasium.
Mm. I'd like to pause for a second. For the listener, if you're willing to share your age so they can get a framework of what we're talking about, like when you grew up in relation to the war and all this.
I'm 65.
Okay.
So I was born in 1955. So, my recollection is, 1960s and 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this temple, where was it the gathering place for the Japanese community?
Sure, it was one of the gathering places.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So, prior to its current location, there was a smaller location on Lincoln Avenue, right near Rosemont. Okay, right where Lincoln Avenue bends, there was a small church there, and then so they had their church there, and then in the early '60s is when they built the temple up on Glen Avenue, right there, Glen in Montana,
right,
which is due east of John Muir High School. Yeah,
yeah, I'm very familiar with that. That's where I used to practice for years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you didn't know that it was there,
basketball.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you didn't know it was there, it's completely hidden.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen it. And I used to live in that neighborhood too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we spent a lot of time in there, playing basketball and doing a lot of things and, being mischievous also.
So you were describing the importance of building a gymnasium.
Yes.
For the Japanese American community?
For the Japanese American community, yes. Because it brought the young families in, and it kind of became a center of activity. Right. So, so the temple, they had the gymnasium, and then they offered, they had a Boy Scout troop 17, and then they offered some martial arts. At that temple, they had a Kendo dojo. They had a judo dojo also at one time. So, and then, they used to have a tea house in the back of the temple, which is now at the Huntington Library.
Oh, wow.
So
they moved the whole tea house.
That was gifted.
Wow.
Because the library, Huntington Library, they take care of it. And then it's there, it's a good place for people to see it. And it's in a lovely...
Oh, that's always been one of my favorite places at the Huntington Library.
Yeah.
I love to visit that.
So
that was moved from
yes,
Northwest Pasadena.
Yeah, well, they took it apart.
Uh-huh.
And the parts were all sent back to Japan to be refurbished.
Oh, wow.
When you say tea house, are you referring to the house on top of the hill in the Huntington Gardens?
No,
It's the
no.
Japanese style.
There's a separate
Yeah.
tea house that's it's separate from that residence building.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a smaller.
You're talking about the one next to the Rose Garden, I think.
Yeah, it's the one on top of the hill.
Yeah.
That is overlooking the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's not the tea house.
Okay.
That's the original house.
Okay.
But the tea house is, I guess, a little ways down from there. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what the population of Japanese Americans is in the San Gabriel or Valley or LA area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the exact population. I could only guess based on my experience at the Japanese, community center, Japanese Cultural Center.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to have a membership of about close to 800 families. Okay. And that's not all inclusive. So I've got to guess that there might have been upwards of 4,000, 5,000 Japanese Americans that lived in the Greater Pasadena area. Yeah.
And then there was some sort of move to South Bay at some point.
Oh yeah. Yes.
I wasn't aware of it when it was happening, but I just like, where did all the Japanese go? And then South Bay was just all this Japanese business.
Right. So, in the greater Los Angeles area, there are these Japanese community centers. There's about 12 of them. Okay. And they're all located in areas where the Japanese relocated after the war. So Pasadena, San Fernando, West Covina, Hollywood has a Japanese cultural center. West LA, Gardena, Long Beach. Now, Long Beach is significant because of the Terminal Islanders. There's a large population of Japanese Americans, who worked in the fisheries. They're fishermen. Yeah. So
What's interesting is all the communities that he just mentioned right now, those are all, in my mind, like they are synonymous with the basketball associations, Hollywood Dodgers, like Montebello Jets, Juan Jets, Pasadena Bruins.
Right.
Yeah.
West Covina Sabres.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gardena FOR.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
So these,
both of you have something that you share in common is this love of basketball, right?
Yeah. It's a very important part of this community, actually.
Yeah.
It really has kept this community together.
Really?
Strangely, as of all things basketball,
I wouldn't have ever thought of that. But I know over the years, Russell has talked considerably about his basketball playing and being involved in the leagues. And they're always Japanese leagues that you have mentioned.
Yeah. And when I was learning a little bit about the history was, I think it's maybe 30 years old now, these leagues. And specifically, they were designed for Japanese Americans because they could not compete height-wise against normal, American kids.
Oh,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So sometimes, when I was playing, I would say, "Oh, it's a Japanese league." I often would get this look from people it feels exclusive, right? But when you describe to them the reasons why, and why they don't allow 6'6" Caucasian players, and then they sort of understand.
Right. But some outstanding players have come from these leagues.
Oh yes,
Yeah. I mean, you'll probably find a lot of these guys and girls playing at Division III college basketball
yeah.
because of the skills they've developed. I mean, we start them out when they're in kindergarten.
Right.
Yeah.
So we definitely have that connection with the basketball. I'm really interested in your origins and story behind your Kendo. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about that?
Sure. Kendo. When I was young, probably around 7 years old, my father wanted me to learn a martial art, learn a traditional Japanese art. And so he actually started me in judo.
Okay.
But I was kind of a small, skinny kid. And so, I got flipped around a lot, so it wasn't so fun. And it just so happened that neighbors, I should say, several of them were practicing Kendo. And one of the neighbors was my sensei, Miyahara sensei, who actually became, he was the highest ranking Kendo sensei in the United States. He was ninth degree.
Oh, wow.
Kyudan Hanshi. And so, he didn't have any sons who practiced Kendo. He had 3 daughters who are very dear friends of mine. But he just lived a few doors down from, and he really encouraged me to practice Kendo.
Can you describe Kendo?
Well, Kendo is basically the way of the sword. And so it's basically, we practice with a wooden bamboo sword, and and we strike each other. We wear equipment to protect ourselves. We have a helmet, kote, on for the wrists, a breast, do. And so it's actually a very active, quite physical sport.
When you say practice, you mean like get hit with a stick multiple times?
Yes.
And what part of the body are you aiming for?
Well, the points are the head, the center of the head, men. The wrist is kote, and the side is do. And then also, when you become a black belt, then another point is the throat, tsuki. Yeah. So those are the 4 main points.
What's the origination of Kendo?
Kendo? Samurai, the way of the sword. Yeah. So that's how they practiced, and it was developed through that. Yeah.
So before the show started, we were talking a little bit about my aunt, and I mentioned that she has the piece of the sword. My aunt said that our family ancestors were in feudal Japan, were on the losing side, and they were exiled to this island, but they were samurai. Yeah. It's really cool to see that and to feel,
Right.
The history behind those artifacts that she has. But
Yeah, that's cool.
So you're a 4th degree black belt and
Yes.
and you've also competed at a quite high level.
I did. Yeah. When I was during my college age, I was able to earn my way onto the U.S. Kendo team at the World Championships, 1976 World Championships in London, England. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. Unfortunately, I don't practice anymore. After I got married and had kids, I kind of retired from Kendo. But it's still a very important part of my life. Yeah. Yeah.
What does it bring to you?
Well, it teaches a lot of things, as a person. Yes, of course, it's very physical. You learn a lot of techniques and, things like that, technical techniques and stuff. But, beyond that is what is important is things like lessons like loyalty, discipline, respect for elders, proper manners, those types of things. And that's part of Kendo. So, and I think that's probably the more important part of learning Kendo. Yeah.
You started when you were 6 or 7?
I think I was about 7 years old. Yeah, yeah. I remember very clearly practicing. And one year, Pasadena, our dojo, hosted a tournament. And at that, I had never competed in a tournament before, and I told Sensei I didn't want to. I was so scared and so nervous and stuff, so I didn't want to. But he told me, he said, no, you have to. We're hosting the tournament. You have to compete. I said, oh, so reluctantly, I did. And turned out I tied for first place. And so we had to draw strings, draw straws, literally, because the guy that I tied with was much older than I. And so I drew the second place straw.
Oh no.
but that was my first competition, right? And then after that, I didn't do anything. I practiced, many years, and then it wasn't until about high school that something really happened with my Kendo. And when I was about, they call EQ is the step before becoming a black belt, Shodan, first degree black belt. I started improving a lot, and then when I became Shodan, first degree black belt, I started to win a lot of tournaments. Something clicked. And so, for the next few years, I practiced pretty hard. And then,
And that's all bamboo.
bamboo.
Do you ever use or have you used real swords?
No.
Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. That's what I was going to ask him. I've seen, on the internet where they slice through multiple.
Oh, right.
Did you ever do that?
No, I never practiced. That's kind of a different art, iaido. Yeah, so that's more form, more kata. Yeah, so another part of Kendo is you do practice form, and you can use a sword to do that, but it's never used in competition.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance in their life with them. And what did you bring today with you?
Well, it so happens I brought a katana.
Wow.
Which is a sword. Yeah.
Can you show that to us, please? There's two of them.
There's two of them. Yeah. I'll show you one. Oh, I could show you both, but so yeah.
So do you feel different when it's out of its...
You definitely feel a certain fear.
Yes, because that's a real
terror.
Yeah, it's quite imposing when you do see it, and it feels it feels very different from a bamboo sword.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what is the significance of these swords for you?
Well, this sword, it doesn't really. It means more than just Kendo to me. This sword was given to me by my uncle in Japan. I guess he learned that I was practicing Kendo here. And we used to visit Japan, every so often. My father would take my sister and I, the entire family, over for the summer. So one summer, my uncle said that he wanted to give me the sword. And, I was really probably, I know I was too young to really appreciate what this was all about. But I do remember that it was a big deal to take this sword out of Japan. Mm-hmm. Apparently they had to get a special permit from the government. And then when it was being transported, when we got to the airport, they had to put it into a special case that was locked, and the keys were only held by the I guess airline people, so nobody could get into it. But you had to have a certain I guess they told me that you needed permission to take this thing out of Japan. Yeah. Do
you know the history of this particular sword?
Actually, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't. I don't think it's that old. It's obviously it is handmade, but I don't know the real history behind it. I don't think it was really used during the Edo period or the samurai period.
What period would you is that period? Is it 16th, 17th?
1700s, 1700s. Yeah, during the samurai period.
So this sword doesn't have that guard at the bottom.
Well, yeah. It normally, when you do practice, and if you use it for practicing form and stuff, yeah, you can put a tsuka on here, tsuba, and you could use it for that. But it in this case, it's just doesn't have one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very imposing to
really
be in the presence.
Very imposing, right?
But this thing means a lot more to me than just a Kendo item, because it represents a lot. about the Japanese culture to me. You know,
what is the Japanese culture to you?
To me, it's you know, it's through the lens of Kendo and my experience with my parents and my families. You know, you talk about loyalty, you talk about discipline. You know, you talk about being a good person. My middle name is Suguru, and it's the character for straight in Japanese. And so, you know, one time I asked my dad, well, why did you give me the name Suguru? And he said, you know, because it means straight. It means you're going to be, you will be a straight person, you know, like a katana, you know, straight, strong, but, you know, all the other things that this thing represents, loyalty, commitment, discipline, right? All these things. So to me, it's really important. And it's kind of it's also reminds me of my connection back to Japan, because it was given to me by my uncle. So my dad was, you know, he was one of 8 children in his family, and he was the only one to immigrate to the United States. So I have a lot of cousins in Japan.
Sure.
Yeah.
What part of Japan?
Wakayama, which is a southern, south of Osaka. Yeah. So, and they were farmers. Yeah. Our family was farmers.
So you mentioned that your father wanted you to practice a martial art. Did you also want this for your children?
Not necessarily, you know. I did ask, but you know, you probably could guess what they ended up playing.
They play basketball.
That's right.
So no martial art for them?
No martial arts for them.
Okay.
No martial arts for them. But they know, you know, how important Kendo was.
They would be considered sansei?
They are considered yonsei, actually. My wife is sansei. Yeah. So
Sansei meaning
sansei,
third generation.
Third generation,
Yeah.
Yeah, so my kids, I'd consider them yonsei, 4th generation.
So what are the ways that you kept the Japanese culture with your own family?
Well, you know, my mom and dad, you know, grandma and grandpa, they speak Japanese, you know, at home. And so grandma's a great cook, right? So a lot of Japanese food. But, you know, we traveled to Japan. I try to take kids, young people, to Japan regularly. So I started Pasadena and Mishima in Japan are sister cities. So in 2002, actually 2001, we were in Japan on it was a youth program, and I chaperoned a couple of students from Pasadena. And then when we met the mayor of Mishima, we suggested, why don't we do a youth exchange program between our cities? The crazy thing was, Mayor Koike in Mishima, during that meeting, he committed to sending 12 students the next year to Pasadena. Wow. Right on the spot. I was like floored.
They came to visit, or did they study here?
They came to visit. It was basically a 1-week exchange program, and
nice.
we would plan.
Has that continued?
Yes, to this day.
How many students?
Usually around 10 to 12 students each year, both ways. Yeah, it's been about that. Yeah. Wow. It's been hugely rewarding.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Let each of the two nationalities get to know the other. Well, you're sending Japanese Americans to Japan, or
not just Japanese Americans. You know, we want everyone. You know,
right?
Yeah. So we welcome anyone who is interested.
When I was growing up in Seattle, which had a very strong but subtle Japanese influence, I always wanted to go live in Japan. That was my big dream, was to go live in Japan.
You should.
Yeah, I applied for something called the Monbushu Scholarship.
Monbushu, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was not accepted. And I, always, in fact, I was on my way to go to Japan to live when I ended up going to New York City instead. But
that's the opposite direction.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, it was east both ways. It's east. But I was always, I always had this desire to live in Japan. I studied Japanese for a little while.
Cool.
But yeah,
that's great.
I don't remember any of it. Well, I can count. I can still count. But
yeah, if you don't use it, you forget. Yeah,
right.
I totally understand.
Yeah,
yeah.
Are you familiar with the Yonsei basketball team?
Yes.
Like the program that would send teams?
Yes, very.
So I almost played on that team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I got hit by a jet ski.
Really?
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I was in a demobilizer for months.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah.
No, I feel very familiar with that program.
As soon as I got hit, or maybe not as soon, I remember being on the dock waiting for the ambulance, and I thought, well, I'm never going to get to go.
Oh, that's too bad.
That was in summer of '95.
Really? Mm-hmm. And that's like an LA area team that goes?
I don't really know. All I remember was there's a tryout process, and they select kids to go.
Yeah, it's kids from all of those communities.
Yeah,
they all try out, and it's an exchange program. You go to Japan and you play basketball with the Japanese teams.
Yeah. I really wanted to do that,
Yeah.
and that's
and then you do a homestay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just a great experience. It's actually it's a life-changing experience for some of these kids. Yeah. I actually know one student. Well, he's not a student anymore, but I know one kid that went to Japan with me away. Maybe almost 20 years ago. He his wife is Japanese. He studied in Japan, and yeah.
So you're also involved in coaching basketball, or you were?
I was, yes.
Yeah.
I coached. Well, I started out coaching high school boys for a couple of years.
Was that at Flint Ridge Prep?
Well, no, Bruins.
Oh, okay.
Bruins, and then I coached at prep when my daughters were playing.
Oh, okay.
Just volunteering to be an assistant, and then but prior to that, coached the high school boys team for a while, and then after that, some parents asked me if they wanted me to coach young kids, young boys, and these were like 8-year-olds. It was like first starting out, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so that was a lot of fun. That was that's
Sure.
just really you develop them, and yeah.
So for the listener, Bruins, when he said Bruins, that's Pasadena Bruins, not UCLA.
Right.
But you are a Bruin.
I am a Bruin, but
Right.
yeah.
So now you are heavily involved in preserving Japanese American history and culture.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Sure. We talk within the Japanese American community. We talk about the importance of preserving Japanese American culture, preserving the community. You can see all the efforts that are being made in Little Tokyo, right? And you're probably familiar with the Japanese American National Museum in Little Tokyo. And there's also a wonderful organization and a website called Densho, densho.org, which is, by the way, headquartered in Seattle, run by a friend of mine, founded by a friend of mine, Tom Ikeda. If you should go visit that website. But all of these organizations, JANM, the Japanese American National Museum, and Densho, they focus on gathering stories nationally. And in March of 2020, almost a year ago, before the pandemic, really, stay-at-home orders, my father passed away, after a year and a half fighting cancer. And And then suddenly, within a month, another dear friend of ours, Itzy Ota, who was the matriarch of Johnny's Sports Shop up on Lincoln Avenue, she passed away. And, I had been really looking forward to learning from Itzy all of these stories that she had about, fishing and growing up in Pasadena. And I wanted to know more about what it was like to start a business, after the war in Pasadena. And I just realized all of these stories were lost, and because, when a parent dies, you kind of really start reflecting on all the things they did for you and things, and how grateful you are. And so I got this idea. I said, we really need to do something to preserve the stories of Japanese Americans in our own community, our local community in Pasadena. And so I decided, hey, I was inspired by an organization in Little Tokyo, the Little Tokyo Historical Society, which, they gather old photos, old stories about Little Tokyo. And so I thought, why don't we do something? There's nothing like that happening here in Pasadena. So, I talked to Jerry, my wife, and I said, I got this idea. I said, yeah, So, and this was during COVID, right? And there's no way we could gather and stuff, but hey, we have Zoom. Zoom is wonderful, right? It's amazing. So I sent out an email to my friends, say, hey, I got this idea. I want to collect pictures and photographs and stories, and then, we can put it on a website, and start documenting all of these wonderful stories about Pasadena. And so and most of these guys were my high school buddies, right? That joined in.
When you say Pasadena, the Japanese American experience in Pasadena.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I want to get deeper into that idea and that project, but let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Wormuth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, we're back with Bryan. Bryan, before the break, you were sharing with us your idea for collecting these stories and pictures.
Right.
So can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. Well, so as I said, I sent emails out to all my friends, and I told them, with this idea, and so I told them all that I'd send them a Zoom invitation, and we do a Zoom meeting. So I was had my fingers crossed. Our first meeting was in July, last July, and we had about 12 people that actually came on, and that was great. I thought, wow, that's good, and we talked about our ideas and stuff, and basically the thing we needed was photos. We needed people to go into their garages and their parents' boxes and look for old photos, and stories and stuff. And then we also did some our own research. There's actually a very nice website in Pasadena. It's called the Pasadena Digital History Collaboration. And if you Google that, you'll find the website. It's managed by Pasadena City College. And that's a collection, a depository for a lot of Pasadena history.
Can you repeat that name?
Yes, the Pasadena Digital History Collaborative. And so we looked in there and we found some really old, interesting photos. So we talked about what we wanted to do, what was our vision for our group. And more than that, it almost felt like a monthly reunion.
No.
We would look at these pictures and we'd start talking about them, and we started kidding each other about these photos. We have a great time during these meetings.
So have you actually set up your website for that?
No, not yet. We don't have a website, but we have a Facebook page.
Okay.
So actually, the Facebook page just went live literally just a few weeks ago.
And what is that?
It's Kansha Pasadena.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Facebook group.
So people can also submit their stories and photos there?
Please.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. If you have old photos, we want you to post them.
Well, how old?
Yeah. Well, in your case, Russell, maybe your
80s.
your grandparents would be perfect. Yeah. But your stories about your parents coming to United States.
Well, here's a story from my dad. So my dad is the youngest of 4. He has 3 older sisters, and the oldest sister is married to a priest, or not a priest. He was a minister in Japan, a Swedish minister, speaks perfect Japanese.
Yeah.
And so they were friends with the president of University of Wisconsin, president. And so my father came here as a exchange student for his senior year in high school. And then he went back to Japan. And my aunt said to him, do you want to go to college in the United States? And he said, sure. So he got into University of Wisconsin, Madison. December 7th anniversary, his first year there, they paper mache'd his car, which, sounds, innocent enough, but it becomes like rock, right? So it was covered with paper and sprayed. The next year, they drove his car, or they put his car in the lake. Yeah, and so this is just for being Japanese. Those are some of the stories that my father shared. But then after that, he had a new roommate, and he said his roommate was the biggest guy on campus, and so then no one messed with him after that.
Yeah.
But those are the stories that my dad had, and my dad actually he speaks a little bit of German, and I wondered why, and he said at that time only Germans would be their friends or friends with Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's
interesting.
Interesting story from
That is very interesting.
from that time.
So the interestingly is the photos we've been collecting so far, and we published a calendar. Our very first project, we published the 2021 Concho Pasadena calendar. I said, we got to get this out somehow, and we all need calendars, But
Sure.
I found out I learned the younger generation don't really use calendars anymore. So it's only the older guys. I just got an email this afternoon, and one of my friends says, next year you should publish it to make it bigger, so it's easier for us to see the pictures.
Well, don't underestimate the value of calendars, because actually, even if they're just some of the older people, but they really treasure them.
Yes. Yeah. It's gotten a lot of good feedback from people. Yeah.
Do you have any connection with Miyatake, Toyo
Yes.
Miyatake?
Yes. Yeah. Sure.
Are you familiar with that name?
Alan,
I don't know the name.
Yeah.
Do you want to share it?
Well, Miyatake, Toyo, when they went to camp, he confiscated the camera into the camp, and he photo documented the experience.
Oh, and so where are those photos?
His son is still a photographer. Is a photographer in San Gabriel,
Right.
Miyataka Studios, and they have those. Alan has all of those photos. Yeah.
So that was from the
World War II.
40s.
The 40s. And a lot of those photos are on display at the Japanese American National Museum also. Yeah.
And were these the only photos taken in the camps?
I'm
at
not
least
sure.
by the inhabitants?
I don't think it was allowed, right?
It wasn't allowed. Yeah. So he what he actually did was he snuck in camera lens, and then he actually built the box. to take photos.
Oh,
Yeah. And then I guess I don't know how he got the film. He must have brought some film also, and maybe ordered film through the mail order and stuff later.
and then had to just save the film until they were released.
I guess somehow he was able to develop the films in camp, without being caught.
Amazing.
Well, that's
right?
an amazing story.
Yeah.
It is. Oh yeah. So Toyo,
Maybe we can have Alan here.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful.
Oh, yeah. That would be a real honor.
Yes, I'll tell him.
Yeah, please. That I want to hear that story
But
even more.
It's a great stories. But yeah.
So what is the value in your eyes of preserving these stories?
Yeah, that's the thing. Before our Russell, you would know very well, but before our very eyes, within one generation, the Japanese American community has become very diverse, right? And what I mean by that is out marriage, right? So, and you can tell from the players on your teams these days, how many of them have Japanese last names? How many of them have other last names? So it's becoming very diverse, very multicultural, our community. And that's natural. That happens. So to me, because that happens, it becomes even more important to preserve what we knew or know about our Japanese American community. When a youngster asks the question, so who was my grandma, or where did they come from, right? It's questions about identity, right? Who am I? So I just felt that it's very important to preserve all of these stories for people, and also for other communities, especially during these times. The activities over the last year, heightened, issues regarding social justice, right? Black Lives Matter. It's become more important for us to understand our cultures, right? And if you get to know other cultures and interact with them, you'll find that we share a lot of values in our families, among our families. So I think we need to really understand we're not that different. Our foods might be a little different and stuff like that, but things like respecting your elders, that's universal, right?
Is it fair to say that the Japanese have maybe become the most assimilated of all Asian communities into, mainstream America?
Yeah, I think you could kind of say that.
And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, I personally think it's a good thing. But
Yeah, I think we've done a great job
yeah.
of assimilating into our society. Okay, but there's still a bamboo ceiling, But the other thing was, as families returned from the camp experience, right, there was still a lot of prejudice and racism against Japanese. So families came back and they were told, don't make trouble, be quiet, be American. And so that was really ingrained into a lot of Nisei, the second generation youngsters. And so I think that has something to do with it also. Yeah.
You haven't said it specifically, but when you are speaking of preserving these stories and pictures, are you referring to specifically how Japanese were dealt with during the war and the result of the camps and how they had to integrate back into society
Sure.
after that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I would like that. Yes, I think so. But it's hard to find photos and stories about that, because a lot of Japanese Americans, the Nisei, when they came home from war, they didn't talk about it. They didn't want to talk about it to the kids. So I'm finding that only recently, when their children are older adults, they might talk about it. or they might tell the stories to grandchildren. They might never have told it to their children themselves, but they might tell the story to their grandchildren. So, but it wasn't talked about. Yeah, they didn't want to talk about it.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of, maybe they might have thrown away old pictures and stuff. Who knows? I don't know.
Sure.
But it's hard to find. That's the thing. I've been trying to dig into those boxes and try to see if you have any photos like that.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a valuable, not resource, but it's a valuable thing for everybody to learn, the history of other people, the history of yourself and the history of other people.
Right.
And you're trying to do that. And
Yes.
I really hope that you can really gather together, those photos and those memories. And
Yeah, I hope so. I really do hope so. And it's only been recent for me. It's only been recent that the Japanese American community, we have a pretty well organized community, right? We got these basketball leagues. We got all kinds of religious, churches, temples and stuff. We got a lot of youth organizations, business organization. We've done a really good job, but I feel like sometimes we're in this very well-organized bubble that not too many people outside of our bubble know about, and we haven't interacted enough. So I just feel like, we gotta, and because our community is becoming so diverse, I think we need to kind of step out of that bubble a little bit and share our experiences so that we can really improve understanding among everyone.
Right.
So that's kind of one of the goals.
yeah, I just
me.
think the Japanese, to me, have never had a strong location, geographical center. I think of Koreatown. I think of not really Chinatown because that's older, but San Gabriel Valley as Chinese. And, there are these big concentrations
Right.
of the community.
Right.
But, yeah, to some degree, Gardena
Right.
for Japanese, but,
South Bay.
Gardena Torrance.
yeah, Torrance, but...
That was a lot because Toyota was there. Toyota and Nissan.
Nissan,
And then
right.
they're gone now.
Yeah, they're going.
Yeah, and I don't know when the South Bay developed as a Japanese, Japanese area, but
Yeah. Well, it was.
is it recent?
No,
or?
no, not necessarily. There's a lot of Niseis that lived in Gardena area before.
Yeah.
You know by the lawn care.
Yes.
I'm
Well-
serious. I mean, you can drive through a neighborhood. I think, okay, that's a Japanese gardener here.
Well, I was saying before, it's kind of a stereotype, but growing up, I associated the lawn
Yeah.
and yard
Beautiful
care.
gardens.
Yeah, the gardens that
Yes.
that I saw in Seattle, and I can tell you, we have beautiful Japanese gardens at the University of Washington and the Arboretum,
Yes.
and it's just beautiful up there.
My father was a gardener.
Yeah,
Yeah, and God, his mom and dad's house. The garden is wonderful.
well.
Museum quality.
When I was at the Huntington Library a couple weeks ago, and I was just in awe of the bonsai,
Yeah.
collection there.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely incredible to see these what look like full-grown,
Right. Some of those
trees.
are really old.
but they're I don't know, a
Miniature.
foot high. I mean, it is incredible and beautiful.
Yeah.
And that art is a really special art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be able to bonsai, right?
Yeah. You could learn how to do it.
Oh,
couldn't you?
yeah. I think Russell is
I'm
doing
trying one.
that.
I have one tree right now.
Really?
It's
Good. Good.
it's a jacaranda, and it's a foot tall.
Yeah.
And it was 7 foot tall.
Oh,
but
you
I cut it
trimmed it
down. And it survived,
Cool.
and it's in a little stout pot. But we'll see what happens with that.
You got to start training. That's great.
So, but those are definitely some of the unique treasures, in Pasadena, the bonsai garden and the Huntington.
Right.
But
that is cool.
I'm always excited for this part of the show where we get to learn some of your favorite places in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay, Bryan, we have the SGV3, which is the part of the show where you tell us 3 of your favorite places or events or memories of San Gabriel Valley.
That's a really tough question. For me, it's really tough because I lived my whole life in Pasadena. There's not 1 or 2 special places. I the 3 things that come to mind for me are kind of the mainstays of our community. As one of the items is the Pasadena Japanese Community Center, Cultural Center, the Pasadena Buddhist Temple, and then also Altadena First Presbyterian Church. So those are kind of the 3 Japanese community centers in Pasadena. So I kind of grouped them as one as far as places and organizations.
We have another cheater, Scott.
Yes, right.
Trying to get more into. I'm just playing with you.
I am cheating. It's tough, but I love. I guess one of the things about Pasadena that's special that I really love is the parade, the Tournament of Roses parade. Mm-hmm. So, we try to go every year. I used to be a member of the Pasadena Exchange Club. I don't know if it's an old service club, and we always had access to these seats that across the street from here.
Yeah, right.
Right, first
row. Right on Orange Grove.
First row, directly across from the photographer's tower.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's wonderful. The parade is just beautiful, and it's just nowhere else in the world can you see a parade like this.
Right.
And you've never missed it until this year.
Well, yeah. Pretty much. I've had to share the tickets with other members and stuff, but I always look forward to it. So that would be one. The other one I think is very cool is the Rose Bowl. I went to John Muir High School. My first real experience with the Rose Bowl is during the day. John Muir High School had male cheerleaders, and I was one. And I just really remember the days when we would go into the Rose Bowl, play Pasadena High School or Blair High School. We would have 30,000 people watching these games.
Oh, those are the Thanksgiving Day games or the Thanksgiving weekend games.
Yeah. The turkey tussle against PHS, man.
Yeah.
And just going in there, with the team and cheering the teams and stuff, that was
exciting.
Pretty exciting. So,
yeah.
And then I go to the UCLA football game, and my kids have grown up watching the football games. So, we always sit in the same seats, and there's a family that's sitting there. So we watch our kids grow up,
at the Rose Bowl.
At the Rose Bowl.
Well, the Rose Bowl is this incredible civic presence that
it is.
Really, I think I picked one of my 3 when I was interviewed by Russell.
Yeah,
the Rose Bowl.
The Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah. It's just a very special place.
My daughters go there for the big concerts. Justin Bieber or whoever it was.
Yeah,
it's a magnificent place. A lot of history,
and the grounds around it,
Yeah, playing golf,
Yeah, or the swim center,
the aquatic center,
and just running around the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that Arroyo Seco is just a wonderful area.
Yeah, it really is.
Really cool. I don't know if people maybe take it for granted or not, but it's pretty special.
It is. It is.
And they got the kids museum there too.
Yes,
right?
now they have that, and that was put in. I think probably within the last 15 years.
Yeah.
If you're a listener to this show and you're not familiar with the Rose Bowl, it's a natural bowl surrounded by hills, I think all around. and you either walk or drive down into the Rose Bowl, and it's not small. It's very large, but you know that you're enclosed when you're in it. And the facilities that we're describing are not close to each other. They're, you have to either drive or walk quite a distance. And it's massive, I think, right? When you're in the bowl, and there's so much to do and so much to see. But it's not this congested little place that's
it's a big expanse. You're right.
It is. Yeah.
You've got the baseball stadium, Jackie Robinson Stadium.
Right, exactly. And next door is the pavilion where they build the Rose Parade.
All the floats that are built there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go farther down the Arroyo, toward the end near the Pasadena Freeway, there's a casting pond.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I
didn't know that.
Are you a fly fisherman?
Really?
My good buddy is.
Okay.
But there's a casting pond there.
Wow.
So that is near so that would be close going down to South Pasadena.
Right.
Yeah, right. Near the horse. What do you call that? The stables there.
But
I didn't know that.
Right. You could.
But I know
you can see it from the freeway.
There's archery. There's a archery
range.
Range, yeah.
Cool.
Did you know that there's also a Japanese garden in South Pasadena?
No.
Oh, it's nice. It's much smaller, much smaller. You have to make a reservation to go, and you pay a small fee.
Yeah.
And you can just sit there and walk around. But it's beautiful.
Where is it?
It's I think it's like right off of Pasadena. Yeah.
There is one right down the street from here, Story or Stearns.
Oh, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. No,
Yes.
that's right here. You could walk there.
Where is that?
It's literally behind Westridge School.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Story or Stearns.
Story or Stearns.
Beautiful. And there's a tea house in there.
It's a little tea house. It was a residence, and they had this beautiful garden. Yeah.
Oh.
Unfortunately, because of COVID, you can't go in there and stuff. But check it out next time.
So behind Westridge.
Yeah, they're on the website. They have a website.
Okay.
Yeah. Story or Stearns.
Okay.
And you could have meetings there. You can just go there and
it's a great venue for small meetings and stuff.
That's funny. I've never seen it.
Retreats and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, I'm really excited to see your vision come to life with the Kansha Pasadena. I hope that many people will contribute photos, stories, and that it will be a treasure for people to come see.
Well, including yourself.
Yeah.
I'm gotta invite you to become a friend of the Facebook page.
Yeah, I definitely will. I guess my stories are not old enough, but I'll see what my dad and family have to say too.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. The more the merrier. I think that's the whole reason we want to share the stories with everyone. Yeah.
So the best way to get a hold of you or to submit stories and pictures would be right now in the Facebook group Kansha Pasadena.
Yeah. Or you could email me affinity2000@earthlink.net. I'm an old one of the original Earthlink guys.
Right.
Yeah, I guess when you get older, you start appreciating these things that are old.
Yeah, right.
It's hard for me to give up that Earthlink address.
That's funny. I never considered that, but everybody who has that address is typically older. All right. Well, Bryan, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm thankful that you were a guest.
Here. I did. This was a lot of fun.
It was very interesting.
Yeah. And I'm glad you didn't have to do any harm to us with your swords.
Yes, you didn't have to use your swords.
Thank
you.
Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.